In 3, 2.
Hello friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. We try to do these on every new moon and every full moon, and as you may have noticed, we didn't do it the last time on the new moon because we ran into technical difficulties that prevented us from doing it in a timely way, so we decided to skip it and wait until now. But I think, as you know, the last new moon had quite a bit of Uranus in it, which is really fascinating to me because that implies synchronicities. It implies astrology being a factor in people's lives because of Uranus. And in fact, all the outer planets are stimulated right now. As you may have been watching our blog pieces that we do, I did a blog piece on the quarter moon that I thought was very interesting because not only do we have, and these things are all true in this full moon coming up as well. It just turns out they're all kind of the same. In different ways, the outer planets are all stimulated right now, and that's so fascinating because when we see outer planets, we think transpersonal, we think getting us out of our ordinary rut when we're doing our day-to-day lives, getting to see a bigger picture, getting to see the universe in action in our lives. You know, there's a quote from the past that I like to refer to every once in a while that came up this morning when I was talking to somebody about things. And that quote is, there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them as we will. In other words, the best laid plans of mice and men don't go the way we think they're going to go. And then later on we find out the universe had other plans for us. You know, we have that moment when we quit our job because we had to leave or we got fired, and we think it's the worst day of my life. I've had to give up this career, this job, and then 5 years go by, and then the next thing you know, you look back on, you say, boy, that was the best day of my life when I quit that job or when I got fired. So I think it's very important that we recognize that we can take things with a grain of salt, that no matter what comes down at us, there's a positive side to it, even if it's just a lesson learned. And you know, thank God if we can learn the lesson and not repeat the mistake. The biggest mistake to make is to blame other people, blame ourselves, blame situations, mourn the loss of something that we didn't expect to lose, and think of it as we're a victim and it's a tragedy. You know, the truth of the matter is we're always changing. Life is a constant flow, constant transformation. And so it's only a reminder of that when we see these strong outer planet configurations that do connote transformation and change. And our society is changing right now too, as we're all aware. And sometimes we worry about it. Very, very prominent environmentalist Paul Hawken had a beautiful thing to say at the last Wisdom 2.0 conference, which I happened to observe. I got live streaming, and it was very fascinating to watch what he had to say because he said there's a problem in the way we regard climate change. We regard climate change as something happening to us. It's something happening for us. It is a signal from the body of this planetary environment that we treasure that things are out of whack and that we need to adjust it. If you ignore the symptoms in your own body, you suffer or you die. And we are in the same situation, and it's a wake-up call, and it's time to take action, and all we have to do is take the requisite action, which is being thrust upon us, and that is the way we grow, isn't it? Through difficulty, through trials and tribulations, we learn, and we succeed, and we get further in our evolutionary path that we're always had been intended. So let's take a look at the chart. Enough philosophizing. Let me go over here. And I think you can see the chart now. And this is the chart. Of course, we're doing it for the West Coast like we always do, but it really just means that the rising would be different in another place because we're using the natural houses. And we're looking at the sun and the moon opposite each other at about 21 degrees of Virgo, 21 degrees and 5 minutes of Virgo. And the fascinating thing right off the bat with this particular full moon is that the moon is aligned with Neptune close by 4 degrees away. And the sun is similarly aligned with Mars, and by George, Mars and Neptune are also partile within about a minute of a degree. Actually, it's 1711 in Virgo, that's Mars, versus 1712 in Pisces, which is Neptune. So we have a Mars-Neptune opposition in perfect alignment with this full moon opposition happening at 9:30 p.m. on the West Coast next Friday, so next Friday evening. So this is really strong. I mean, the other thing to think about is in addition to Mars being opposite Neptune, look where Jupiter is. Jupiter is 16 degrees of the sign that makes a T-square of Sag, which is another mutable sign along with Virgo and Pisces. So we have a T-square, and we have Jupiter involved with Neptune. And what does that tell us? It tells us quite a bit, really, because this is a very positive sign and a very kind of spaced out sign as well. It's a time not to look at the hard and fast details and nitty-gritty details of what we're doing, but to look beyond that, to see a fulfillment in a spiritual approach which we can take. In other words, it's not so bad when you think about it in the big picture. It's not so bad when you look at it as an evolution that's supposed to happen in your life. And when I say all the outer planets are involved, take a look at the fact that you know that Uranus was involved in this new moon. Here we are at the full moon, and it's the sun has moved another 15 degrees, and what we have here, instead of a trine, we have a sesquiquadrate, 135-degree aspect, which, you know, if you put the mouse on it in the Time Passages software, you can see sun sesquiquadrate. I don't know if you can see that coming up in the bottom there, between Uranus and the sun. See if I can zoom in on that. Well, Venus is also, sesquiquadrate the ascendant, so that's confusing things a little bit. You know what we can do? We can do a single planet aspect, so we can display and go to single planet and choose, let's choose the sun. And then you can see this aspect here between, it's a tenth of a degree, is what I was looking for to tell you how close it is, between the sun and Uranus. So this is one of the handy features of the Time Passages software. You can just see one planet when you look, and then you can just go and change that back. So what I want to talk about as far as the outer planets are concerned is also we have this amazing parallel between Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which has been true for quite a while, and it's true now. If we right-click here, nope, it's not going to work. Let's see, maybe I can do it this way. So if we right-click, we can see it's minus 22.4 degrees, and if we go to Saturn, do that one, it's 22.5, and if we go to Pluto, 22.3. So within a tenth of a degree in each case, 2/10 if you take the widest spread. So this is really interesting. I mean, a degree is a parallel. A tenth of a degree is a close parallel. So we have a very strong bond that is hard to see in the two-dimensional description of the circular chart like this, but between Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter right now is this very strong connection. So what does that tell us? It tells us in terms of society, because Jupiter and Saturn are called the social planets, refers to society, it means big transformation is at hand. So this is a preview of what's happening next year when they become closer and closer. You know, Saturn eventually comes to Pluto, and that happens in January of next year, and then Jupiter comes along with Saturn towards the end of Pluto, towards the end of Capricorn where Pluto is. And you'll see that triple conjunction coming up in about mid-November of 2020, which is right after the US election, which is quite interesting. So what we're seeing is over this next year and a half, very, very powerful societal transformation, be the end of this decade in 2020. And you know, what's really happening is, as we can see in the polarization right now, there is progressive versus conservative empowerment very strong, and we can see that Uranus is actually very powerful in this current skies, and meanwhile Pluto and Saturn are very powerfully configured, which is conservative empowerment, you know, because we have strong Saturn. So we have strong Saturn, we have strong Jupiter. Saturn says, hold on, don't go too far, let's consider limitations, it may be difficult to get something done. Jupiter is all gung-ho, let's do it. Uranus is all gung-ho, let's do it. And Uranus is configured with not only the Sun, but also with Venus and Mercury in this configuration, which are located together at the tail end of Virgo, at 29 degrees of Virgo. So I think it's a very fascinating full moon configuration that's coming up. And I think what the basic theme of everything that's going on right now is that we really have to change, that, individually and collectively, we have to make sacrifices, we have to uh, ditch what's not working for us, habit patterns that are dysfunctional, that are outmoded, have to be outgrown, and we just have to look forward to that and look and face it squarely. It's like a Pluto transit to your natal chart, and when that's happening, you just have to take the situation as it comes and not try to hold on to, getting stuck is the worst thing with the Pluto transit. You try to hold on to the past and it just isn't available anymore. And you have to really go with the new thing. Something has to give, something has to give up. You have to give up, rather, something that you have going. And it's because it's not working for you anymore. You have to embrace the new, let go of the old, and that's the message of Uranus. Look to the new horizon. Don't worry about the past. And so that's what we're up to. We see the polarization of these times, as I started to say, and they are tending us toward, do we go forward and make changes that are necessary, or do we what do we need to hold on to so as not to make too many changes too fast? Those are the situations that are inhabiting each of those points of view, for the left and the right wing of the political spectrum. And we'll see what happens. We'll see how that battles out, or how compromise is reached. We'll see if we can start to act on climate change. I mean, that's very important. I try not to be political here, but on the other hand, the science is very clear that man-made changes to the atmosphere are contributing to stronger storms, to sea level rise, to the acidification of the ocean. I think we all know that that's something that's got to be dealt with. And the sooner the better, if we don't want to see things get very dire very quickly. So it's a big challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge to our culture. Can we rise to the occasion, or can we stick our head in the sand and forget about it, which is what I believe some of the conservative approaches are indicating. This is not a time to hold back. This is a time when we should be going to alternative fuel supply, alternative energy supply, I should say, and move forward. So we have that challenge, and in our own lives as well, we have the challenge. Can we move forward? Can we inhabit the future rather than attempting to inhabit the past? That's what's happening. And the vision is there, with Jupiter and Neptune very strongly configured with each other and very strongly configured as part of this actual configuration of the full moon with Mars involved. Mars opposite Neptune is saying, dream, dare to dream. Don't take action strictly on the basis of practicality. Dare to dream big and make a spiritual commitment to what you're up to, and recognize that there's more to it than just the three-dimensional reality that we can see all around us, see, feel, hear, and taste. There's something more beyond that. And when we open up to it, it's a pretty magical experience, as many of the mystics through history have been able to demonstrate to us by their commitment to seeing things from a more overall standpoint, seeing the universe beyond that picture of the man lifting up the corner of the curtain and seeing beyond the physical realms into the realms of the beyond, which is where astrology comes in, because how could astrology work otherwise? If it was just planets bumping around in their orbits, how could that have these amazing symbolisms that we see active when we look at any natal chart? And speaking of which, what we have now in this chart, besides the things that I've already mentioned, is we do have a strong Mercury-Venus conjunction at the very last degree of Virgo, just as these two planets are both preparing to enter into Libra in the next day or two. And Mercury rules Virgo, which is the sign that they're both leaving, and Venus rules Libra, the sign that they're moving toward. So it's very interesting to see these two rulers of the two adjacent signs of Virgo and Libra as we're making this transition, another transition similar to the cultural transition that's happening. So in micro, we're seeing these planets change signs and move into what would be a more balanced approach, what would be a more relationally oriented approach, versus a detailed approach that keeps us in the perfection of who we are individually. So there's a movement to embrace a wider perspective, to embrace relationship versus singularity, to embrace working with the culture, the surrounding culture, versus ignoring the surrounding culture and trying to just take care of our own needs. So there's a big deal going on there, I believe. And it's interesting to note these Sabian symbols, which we often refer to, and I'm not sure about the Sabian. I think the Sabian symbols are kind of interesting for the sun and moon, but I don't want to talk about that right now. But I do want to make reference to the Sabian symbol of this last degree of Virgo, the 29th degree, which is, well, it's the 29 plus degree, which is called the 30th degree, the last degree of Virgo. And the Sabian symbol is interesting. A false call, unheard, in attention to immediate service. And certainly that's a theme for our times, is it not? The fact that we have all these messages flying around, all this fake news flying around, all the false calls, and what can we do but be discriminating? And what can we do but try to suss out what the real truth of the situation is? And what can we do but articulate our own truth, which comes to us as what we really represent? We can find out who we are and what we really and truly represent as we move into the future, our own future, and the future of the culture. And we try to articulate that viewpoint and speak for what is within us. Speak for what you really deeply believe, and you can't go wrong. You're not a victim anymore. You're not subject to forces beyond your control. You're articulating your own freedom and your own truth, and then let that fall where it may. You can't necessarily change things, not by yourself, but if everybody gets on the same bandwagon, by George, things change. Even in terms of Washington, D.C. and the administration and governments all over the world, public pressure is very vital in making changes, and you can see it affected all the time. The cabinet secretary of the Trump administration that had been involved in keeping this guy Jeffrey Epstein from going to jail, public sentiment came out, and they realized what had happened, and there was just this, undeniable sentiment that he should resign in recognition of what he'd been up to. So, I mean, this is very important, and every voice counts, and that's what we need to keep in mind. So the one last thing I want to mention is these new planets. This is Haumea at 25 degrees of Libra, pretty much exactly opposite Eurus, which is really the feminine warrior energy of standing up for yourself. And so having it with Haumea, which represents Earth Goddess energy and represents really taking the environment seriously and taking the Earth and the needs of the Earth seriously, that's a very powerful thing. It's been in the sky for a long time. And we have seen a greater and greater degree of interest in climate change and what has to happen. There's going to be a CNN debate, I'm pretty sure, about climate change coming up, or maybe it's MSNBC, I'm not sure. But this is really a big deal, and it is time for everybody to get on board, get on the same page, and try to figure out how to make things happen with the Earth. We do also have another of these Earth energy planets, which is called Makemake, which was the creation god of the Rapa Nui culture, and it has to do with dwindling resources, because they did have that problem when they were discovered by the Europeans. They cut down all their trees, or the trees had died, and they had no way to make canoes and fish, and they were on a subsistence basis because of their dwindling resources. So I think it's fascinating that comes along, these two new dwarf planets beyond Pluto, very close in their orbital period to Pluto. And of course we have also the factor that right now Makemake is exactly opposite Chiron. This has been true for a while, by the way. These guys have been lined up opposed to each other, and Haumea has been lined up opposed to Eris. And I think we are seeing, of course you'd see that as the painful situation that the Earth is in right now, that the environment is getting to problematic levels of things. So, I think it is time that we all take action about this, and the more people that can get on the bandwagon, or if you have beliefs yourself that you need to articulate about these things, go for it, and make your voice heard and make your statements known and do what you can do, and that's all you can do. So you don't have to feel, my gosh, I can't change things. By just changing yourself, you're making a big change in the world. So I think that's what we needed to say about this. I know we're not really pre-announcing and taking question and answers, but there may have been some comments that have come in. No, I guess not. So let me just switch back now, and we'll go back to the other view. And just to say in closing, I think astrology is such a helpful tool for being able to see a mirror for not only what you're going through individually, what your own chart tells you, but also what the culture is going through. And we do have the Time Passages Standard Edition, which is kind of the middle level, not the basic edition, which is beginner, but has quite a few features that are very handy to be able to suss things out. We do have that on sale right now. I'm not sure if it's 25 off or 30% off. And so I recommend that if you're interested in learning more about these things. So we try to help with that. We try to make it available to people so that they can find out for themselves what astrology tells you. And to me, it's very magical that astrology works. It shouldn't work. If our 3D understanding of the world and cause and effect is as simple as scientific method, if that's all there is, astrology really doesn't have much of a reason to work, and yet it does work. So we have a more magical universe than we actually had previously thought. It's more like they used to think, that there was this God Almighty in the heavens, and that there were things that happened on earth that reflected our godlike nature. It is really true that there's more to this than the simple materialistic viewpoint that unfortunately informs much of what's happening in the current society. So that's it. Have a nice couple of weeks, and we'll catch you on the next lunation. Take care.